Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, the #1 sports information program in America, the Breakfast Bankroll, with your host, the sports broker, Jeff Dawson.
Good morning, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Breakfast Bankroll for Friday, January 27, 2023. Just 4 days left of the first month of the year, but more importantly, just 4 days left before the launch. Massachusetts taking bets legally for the first time. And today we are honored to have a special guest come and talk to us and tell us exactly the behind the scenes, the before, the during, where we are today, and what to expect Tuesday and moving forward. The one and only Mr. Bill Speros at Bookies at Boston Herald, USA Today, ESPN, Orlando Sentinel, Denver Post, 35 plus years, verified OG, and we are glad to have him in our studio. So without further ado, let's bring him in, Mr. Bill Speros.
Hey, good morning. I don't know how I'm going to top that intro. I feel like the guest star in an episode of Kojak, you know, like his Greek cousin, the one that was a drug dealer that he finds dead in New Jersey, and he's got to solve the murder of cousin Nick.
Kojak, Mr. Telly. Been a long time since I've seen that show. I might have to pull it up on YouTube after this show. Tuesday, big day for Massachusetts. Big day for some brick and mortars, Encore, Plain Ridge, and is there a third that will be launching?
MGM Springfield.
MGM Springfield. Okay. We didn't just click our heels and all of a sudden, presto magic, put the lights on and create the lines, and we're taking bets. There's so much league legislation. So I want to go way back. And as I was talking to you behind the stage, ECSI launched in 2015, January 1st, with the idea and the thought process legalization of sports wagering would eventually be passed. It did in 18. And still now here we are in 2023, and Massachusetts is finally getting to the window. So, Bill, can you give us the way back, maybe since past the dragging of the feet? Some people want to say what Mass did and basically doing their due diligence to where we are today and to what to expect from Tuesday, and obviously moving forward for the consumers, for the sports bettors in Massachusetts.
Sure. The Supreme Court decision that opened the door for nationwide sports betting passed, as you know, was in May of 2018. So it's been almost five years. Before it was decided, before the court's decision came down, New Jersey had already legalized sports betting. So New Jersey was up and running about 10 days after the Supreme Court decision. Of course, the case itself, Murphy versus the NCAA, was New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy suing the NCAA because it had blocked sports betting. Supreme Court said this is not a federal issue. The law that was passed in the early 90s is not valid. States decide. A lot of states were up and early, including Rhode Island. And soon thereafter, New Hampshire followed, then Connecticut, and then New York. So Massachusetts, of course, Vermont has maple syrup and cheese. So Vermont's never going to have sports betting, in case you're wondering. So Massachusetts is basically surrounded by states with sports betting and cheese. So it was only a matter of time before the legislature was going to, not missed this opportunity for tax dollars. I believe it was Senator Lesser had proposed the first bill in 2019, but it took 2 years for a bill to clear the House, which it did in the summer of 2021. And then last spring, after sitting on it for 9 months, a pregnant pause, you might call it, the state Senate decided to pass their version of a sports betting bill, which differed greatly from the House version. So naturally, we sat for 2 months waiting for a deal to emerge. And at 5:09 a.m. on August 1st, 5 hours after the legislature was supposed to close, but you know how that goes, the Immaculate Conception occurred, and the negotiating committee came out of their little office on Beacon Hill and said, "We have a deal for a sports betting bill." And 10 days later, it was signed into law by Governor Baker. So at that time, there were feverish expectations of statewide gambling in the early throes of football season before the Patriots would be eliminated from the playoffs. But unfortunately, a lot of those expectations were unrealistic, because between you placing your first bet at Encore and that law being signed by Governor Baker stood the Mass Gaming Commission, an entrenched bureaucracy whose job is to ensure its existence like every other bureaucracy does. So instead of cutting and pasting the rules from Michigan or Illinois or Arizona, naturally they had to start from scratch. So they had to come up with a couple of hundred rules and regs. They had to, license and investigate all the potential operators, come up with a way to, not only did they have to do this process, they had to come up with a way to do the process, because there was nothing. The law itself is not very long. It's only a couple of pages. And, like anything else that comes out of a bargaining session at 5 o'clock in the morning, there were some serious holes in it. So those holes had to be patched by the Gaming Commission, which is kind of empowered to do whatever it wants. So that's why it took as long as it did. If you want to compare Massachusetts to other states, it's probably in about the 40th percentile in terms of how long it took from the law to be passed until the first bet was placed. I mean, this is about average, maybe. For retail, they actually got a little ahead of the curve. And the reason why the casinos can take bets, but the mobile apps can't, is because the casino operators have already been licensed by the state, and they're already regulated by the Gaming Commission. So the Gaming Commission doesn't have to do a full-bore investigation of Encore, MGM Springfield, or Plainridge Park, because they've already done it. Whereas they've never investigated DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the reason why there's a gap between you being able to bet in Springfield, Plainville, or Everett in person on Tuesday, and you being able to place that same bet through DraftKings or FanDuel in March. That's the gap. They had thought, because they initially received about 30, they call them scoping surveys. They initially received 30 scoping surveys from potential mobile operators. So they feared that they would have to investigate and vet 30 different operators. But, once a lot of these operators looked at the application fees, the rules and regulations involved, the market, and the competition, most of them bowed out. I mean, they're still 3 licensees short in terms of how many they can give out. And Raynham Park, which we're very familiar with back in the day, as dog racing partisans invested much time and money into that facility. Raynham Park was initially going to partner with Bet365 as its mobile partner, but they pulled out because of the state's high bar in terms of regulatory issues and entry fees. So as of now, the consumer has a lot of choices, both in terms of the retail side and in terms of the mobile side when that happens in March. On opening day, they keep telling us before the NCAA tournament on March 14th. So whenever that magical day hits in March, you're going to have 10 different mobile apps that you can bet from. The 11th Better, BETR, isn't going to be up and running yet because of I'm sorry, Betway isn't going to be up and running because its parent company was sold and there's some issues there. But you're going to have 10 operators up and running on launch day as of now. So that's a pretty good number. That's as many as they have in New York. I actually think they have 9 in New York. It's more than most states. So it's going to be a super competitive market for the consumer, which is always good. You know, just logic and history tells me that you're not going to have 10 mobile operators in 5 years because the market's not that big. And you in Massachusetts is unique because you have let me see if I count this right. You have 4 operators in Mass that have a huge advantage over the other companies. And then you have one, FanDuel, which is the biggest sports betting book in the country. You know, obviously you have DraftKings, founded in Massachusetts. You know, people in Massachusetts have been inundated with DraftKings ads through fantasy, through billboards for 10 years. That's a hometown company. Penn and Barstool. Obviously, Massachusetts is Barstool's core. According to its CEO, Jay Snowden, Massachusetts is apparently the most fervent of all states when it comes to supporting Barstool. So you have that hometown advantage for those 2 operators. And then you have the 3 casino owners who are partnering with different sites. Wynn, Encore is partnering with WynnBET and Caesars. So that gives them an advantage because they're here. Same with MGM and MGM Springfield. So, you know, you have these 5 mobile operators that have this humongous built-in home field advantage over the other 6 who are hoping to kind of crack. And, you know, you're going to have 6 operators basically fighting for less than 10% of the market. And so that's probably, you know, something where eventually they're not all going to want to stick around. The mobile operators all have the 6 that aren't tied to the casinos each have 1-year licenses. So we'll see what happens. You know, hopefully they all make it, but it's really hard to see how that's going to happen given this market and given the presence of the top 5 that have either advantages in terms of size like FanDuel or advantages in terms of hometown recognition like DraftKings and Barstool, or the ones that are already tied to the casinos. They are, you know, they seem to have a really big edge. So it'll be interesting from that perspective to see how these companies do from a business perspective. From a consumer perspective, you're going to have a lot of options. You're going to have a lot of choice. And, you know, in certain instances, you'll be able to shop around in terms of juice and even in terms of numbers. But you do have to remember, and I want people to know this, the DraftKings number in Massachusetts is the same as the DraftKings number everywhere else. They cannot alter their odds or alter their price from state to state. What they can do is offer certain special bets, like a certain parlay, you know, or a certain type of wager can be geared to one market or another market. But you can't, like, you're not going to see like the bookies would. Your bookie would say, "Oh, you want to bet on the Celtics? Okay, they're -6.5. But if you were betting on the Celtics in Cleveland, they'd be -2." You're not going to. You can't. Just the books aren't allowed to do that. So the odds you get on the Patriots at FanDuel in Massachusetts is the same odds you're getting on the Patriots at FanDuel in Arizona.
So I'm just trying to, off the top of my head, rattle these off. Obviously, we know DraftKings, we have FanDuel. I can't even read my my writing here. DraftKings, FanDuel, Barstools, Caesars, BetMGM. What am I missing here for the mobile apps here?
Okay, well, we have 5 mobile apps that are tied to the 3 casinos, and these apps, you know, made the decision to link their applications to the casinos for different reasons. Some were obvious, like BetMGM to MGM Springfield. That's obvious. Barstool to Penn, Plainridge. That's obvious. Then you have WynnBET, which partnered with both Encore, which partnered with both WynnBET and Caesars. So you have those. Oh, and I forgot Fanatics. My apologies. Fanatics also partnered with Penn. So you have 5 mobile operators: Fanatics and Barstool partnered with Plainridge, WinBet and Caesars partnered with Encore, and BetMGM partnered with MGM Springfield. Those are called the tethered operators, which just means that their applications were submitted in conjunction with the land-based operators for a lot of different reasons, marketing costs. They all had to pay the same application fee, by the way. So, Fanatics had to pay $5 million. Barstool had to pay $5 million. No one got a deal or discount by applying with the casinos. It was just much more an internal business decision. From the consumer point of view, it's not going to matter. When you're downloading the BetMGM app or the WinBet app or the Caesars app, it's not going to matter that their application was tied to a casino. That none of that matters to the consumer. It only matters on the legislative end because that's how the law was written.
Okay.
So that's a little confusing. That's much more a process thing. It's not really anything that's relevant. I'm sure there'll be some deals involved with your win points and Caesars and all that, but from a betting perspective, it's not going to matter. Then you have 6 other operators, mobile operators, that win it on their own: DraftKings, FanDuel, PointsBet, Better, BETR, Betway, and Bally's. Yeah, the 3 Bs are kind of, alliterative, but it's just kind of funny. You always have to rattle them off. So those 6 operators are on their own. They each got a 1-year temporary license. 5 of those 6 will be up and running on launch day in March. The other one, Betway, won't be up and running because their parent company was sold. So there's some internal issues with the sale that are kind of delaying. It's an inside baseball thing that has nothing to do with the company or the betting experience. It's just more of they're not going to have all their ducks in a row by launch day. So on launch day, you'll have those 5 untethered mobile operators as well. But then again, from the customer's point of view, it's not going to make a difference. You'll have the FanDuel app like you'd have the FanDuel app in New York. You'll have the DraftKings app like you'd have the DraftKings app in Michigan. So it's going to be the same experience for the customer when all of these apps launch. Now, obviously, there'll be a lot of competition to get customers. That's basically what my company does. We're a third-party affiliate. Our job is to bring customers to these different companies. So I will tell everybody to go through Bookies and use all of our promo codes because that's how I get paid. But, again, from the customer's experience, a lot of this is not going to matter to the customer's experience. What the customer is going to see, or more importantly, not see, is a lot of the aggressive marketing, a lot of the, when Caesars launched in New York, and I think you can still get this, although it's down to $1,000. When Caesars launched in New York, they offered a $2,000 free bet. That's how much it mattered to them to get customers in New York. Now, you're not going to be able to do that in Massachusetts. Massachusetts and Ohio have the toughest, or will have the toughest, restrictions in terms of marketing and advertising of any of the current jurisdictions that allow gambling. The hammer is already flying in Ohio. You've had 4 operators fined, depending on the operator, $150,000, $300,000, or $500,000 for different violations of the rules they have in Ohio, some of which were broken even before these companies launched. So they're kind of leading the way, and of course the MGC is salivating over the fact that they could be as restrictive or more restrictive as anyone else. And we've already seen that because Bet365 was set to partner with our friends in Raynham, but they pulled out because they deemed the restrictions in Massachusetts too counterproductive and, in terms of marketing and in terms of the entry fee. So there's a high bar to get into this market, which again is done with the consumer in mind. Of course, we all know where the road of good intentions leads us. But, that's their perspective. I've covered enough of these meetings to know what their perspective is and what their priorities are. And that is a big priority for the Gaming Commission. Now, whether or not that goes too far, the marketplace will determine that. So you're not going to have, you're never going to see the phrase free bets in Massachusetts. That's like literally been stricken in the regulations. So you're not going to be able to, when you sign up for FanDuel through bookies, in Massachusetts, it's not going to be, $300 free bet. Like that phrase free is being purged by all the operators and all the affiliates, because every state and every jurisdiction in the country is going to pick up on that. Ohio was the first one to do it. Say you can't say the word free, period. So you're going to see a pullback, and you're already seeing a pullback in television advertising and in some of these aggressive, somewhat too aggressive ways to get new customers, especially in terms of bonuses or free bets. There'll still be bonuses. There'll still be incentives for people to sign up. That's how these companies make money. But they're just going to have to be a little bit more savvy in how they do it and not be so over the top. And especially in a place like Massachusetts, which already has a path which has been set by the regulators in Ohio, where they don't screw around. And they've hammered these companies right out of the box. I mean, they've only had betting in Ohio since January 1st, and they've already had 4 operators fined. And some of it is, some people say it's predatory, where the operators just go ahead and break the rules and don't care. I don't buy that argument. Not that 150 grand is going to put any company out of business, but the publicity for them is terrible. Nobody wants to be seen as breaking the rules, especially when it comes to marketing to minors. I mean, that's like, you and I grew up with candy cigarettes, and nobody wants to be seen as someone who's trying to push sports betting to someone under the age of 21. I mean, that's a death sentence. So I don't necessarily think the operators are doing any of this by design. I think they're doing it because a lot of the rules are very convoluted. And frankly, it's just a question of, we have this sort of ad in Illinois, so we want to use it in Ohio or Indiana because it's a neighboring state, and boom, you can't do that. So this, I was told by somebody, they use the phrase war room, that all the operators have war rooms right now going on in terms of how they have to deal with different regulations in different states. And that, you can't just make one ad for DraftKings for everybody. It's got to be tailored for every single market that they operate in. And that's probably something that a lot of operators never expected, when they first started, especially companies that are based in Europe, like FanDuel. Their parent company Flutter used to be Paddy Pay in England. So, over there, all the rules in England are the same for the entire country. Here we have 50 different states. For a lot of Europeans, that's still a hard thing to grasp. So, that's kind of the ins and outs of where we're at in terms of how we got here and where we're headed in Massachusetts.
I have a million questions in my head that I want to ask you, and I don't even know where to start, which for me is unheard of, because this is such a big topic. There's so many avenues to go down.
Guess, it's good for me. It keeps me employed.
The Ohio and the fining is amazing, because, as you said, take your regular app that's in 5 or 6 states already, and it's just a copy and paste, and it's just send out 1 million emails, and who responds? Put $5 in, get $200 back in an instant, and as you said, free bet. How are we going to entice the new customer? What's the carrot? And Ohio and Mass are just like no, not so fast here. So I think it was Ohio that said, "Oops, I'm sorry, it was a mistake."
Yeah, I would say Ohio was the line in the sand. That's the turning point, and how, from a marketing and business end, not a betting end, because all the bets are pretty much the same. Different. Massachusetts is actually, I think it's 5 or 6 states. where you can actually bet on the Academy Awards. They actually allowed that in Mass. A lot of states didn't. So, there's different things that you can bet on in different states, but it's basically the same experience once you go on your app or when you're in line at Win or at Encore on Tuesday to bet. That experience is pretty much universal. What is different and what varies by state because of the way the Constitution was drawn up was the different rules and different regulations between states, how they're taxed, how they're regulated in terms of, internal enforcement, how they can market and approach customers, and the punishment and penalties for not following the rules. And Ohio was very much like, okay, we're going to do this, but we're going to follow the rules. And they've been really aggressive in enforcing them. And they're not giving you like a first strike. It's like Pete Rose, one strike, you're out of the Hall of Fame. In Ohio, one strike and you're going to be fined $150,000 for like sending emails inadvertently to people under 21. I think that cost DraftKings $150,000 or $250,000. I forgot the exact amount. So I'm not sure in Mass. I think it's basically they really haven't. The rules and the regulations that passed aren't very specific in terms of punishment. And so the Gaming Commission is going to be handling all of these infractions on a case-by-case basis. And they've been generally forgiving in the past to the casinos. Like when people under 21 are caught betting in the casino, they want to know what happened. And the casino operator will say, well, we had 27 guys and he slipped past 28 or something like that. So, I think in defense of the operators, they're not intending to break these rules because it serves no purpose. And the argument to counter that in Ohio is where someone posted on Twitter, oh, well, all these companies are breaking the rules on purpose. And I said, well, it's actually 4 out of 16. And the biggest company of all, FanDuel, hasn't been accused of any wrongdoing. So this is not some conspiracy. This is not the cigarette companies. These are independent companies in a very competitive industry that are fighting for their place in it. There's no conspiring going on because it doesn't serve their interests. It doesn't serve the interest of DraftKings to be fined $250,000 and to be grilled by regulators in 13 or 14 different states as to why they were fined $150,000. That doesn't serve their interest, short-term or long-term. So anyone who would suggest that they're doing this on purpose or from a predatory standpoint, not that it would rise to the level, but these companies are publicly traded. You're getting into a lot of gray area there, making those accusations. So I don't believe that's the case in any way, shape, or form. I just think, in Ohio, using that example, it's like we screwed up. And that's basically what they said, because we didn't know the rules or the rule was unclear, but they're not fighting any of these. Most of them are agreeing to pay them because they don't want to antagonize the regulators. That makes no sense. That's my job. But it doesn't. They have to be very careful and tread very lightly around the regulators. So I don't buy that. I think they all just want to operate their business and make money, and follow whatever rules are in front of them to do so in every state.
I can ask you a 2-part question here. On Tuesday mornings at 10:20 every week, I have a good friend and colleague, Julian Edlow, on from DraftKings. He's been with DraftKings a long, long time. As you said, DraftKings, the home state. I'm in Centerville, Mass. right now on Cape Cod. So I'm about an hour from them, give or take a few minutes. FanDuel, DraftKings, they're the fantasy guys. As you said, it's just embedded in our heads, whether it's a TV commercial, you go to Fenway Park, TD Garden, you go to Gillette, there's always something up there. My first question, do you see DraftKings as making a move like in Chicago, trying to get into a TD Garden, to get into Fenway Park or somewhere on Lansdowne Street or in Gillette, to get their own brick and mortar, say. That's number one.
No, that's not going to happen.
Okay, so that's a no.
No, that's a no. No, the law, again, you had some pre-existing operators in the state, the casinos. So basically, to get the legislation passed, the casinos made sure that the only and of course Raynham and Suffolk too. I'm not forgetting about them, but they haven't. Raynham's applied, Suffolk hasn't applied, so I should include Raynham in this discussion, even though they haven't been formally approved yet. When the Sports Wagering Act was passed and signed into law by the late great Governor Charlie Baker of the NCAA, boy, that's a perfect spot for him. Another useless bureaucratic agency full of hacks. When the Sports Wagering Act was crafted and pushed through the legislature, the current pari-mutuel sites, Suffolk and Raynham, and Plainville is still trying to work out a racing card down there, by the way. So you had 2 pari-mutuel sites and 3 casinos, and their argument was, look, Encore was about what, $3 billion? I mean, that place is as good as any casino in Vegas. It is really, really nice. I think Springfield was $800 million. Plainville, to their credit, they toughed it out. They stuck it out through the recession and through COVID. So they're saying, look, we employ all these people. We spent all this money to build here. We've pumped all this money into the community. My sister-in-law is a teacher at Emory, and teaching English as a second language. And all of that is paid for by the casinos. They give money to Everett, Somerville, Medford, Charlestown. I mean, they're pumping tons and tons of cash into this place. So their argument was, we've been here, in some cases, since 1932, in the case of Suffolk Downs. We've been here. We've been paying money. We've been employing people in the state. We've been paying taxes. We've been paying property taxes. We've been paying taxes off our revenue to the state for all this time. And then you're going to let these people come in out of nowhere and let them set up shop where we've already been here? No. So that's the reason why you're not going to have any retail betting in the state outside of those 3 casinos and Raynham and Suffolk Downs, because that was the deal, that they would, not raise holy hell to stop sports betting with whatever influence they had in exchange for an exclusivity on land-based wagering, brick and mortar sports books. That's the law. I don't see that changing. I don't see the Gaming Commission. I don't think they have the right from a legal standpoint to alter that part of the statute. So, yeah, you're not going to see any other retail-based operators outside of those 5.
Okay. Second, as you know, the Mass Lottery does a pretty good job in our state and introducing the $50 scratch tickets. So, what's next? In a couple of years, the $75 and $100 one. But that's where
it's got to be the crypto, like gazillion dollar scratch.
My question to you is
5 Tom Brady's.
My question to you is this: I have right down the road from me a 7-Eleven. At any point, does the Mass Lottery step in where I can go and get a candy bar, a loaf of bread, a half gallon of milk, and they can go over to the lottery machine and punch in a $10 14 parlay?
Not so much that, but when the law was written, the concern over what hit the lottery would take was a big part of it. So your new state treasurer just the other day was talking about how the lottery brings in billions in revenue and this brings in millions of revenue. So on the one hand, the lottery is poo-pooing sports betting, but on the other hand, the lottery made sure that the Sports Wagering Act of 2022 included a codicil that every operator in the state work with the lottery. So basically on each application, of course, much of this stuff was discussed in executive session. On each application, each potential operator had to explain how they were willing to work with the lottery from a marketing perspective and almost as a partnership. So to your point, if that's something that, one of the operators wanted to propose, that's something that I could foresee the Gaming Commission approving. But, so that would be, but then again, that would be a akin to having a brick and mortar sports book if you can place bets at a lottery terminal. And of course, then that brings in this whole other argument from a marketing standpoint where, DraftKings and FanDuel are told to have all these restrictions on their advertising and marketing, especially when it comes to under 21. And yet you can, when I was 8, I could walk into Cumberland Farms and see 50,000 mass lottery ads all over the place. So that, that opens up a whole nother argument from both the land-based operators and from a marketing perspective. Because all of a sudden, how can you say I'm going to place a sports bet at the lottery terminal when I only have to be 18 to play the lottery, but I got to be 21 to place a sports bet? That's number one. And number two, from a marketing perspective, DraftKings is saying, wait a second, you're telling me I can't have an ad or BetMGM, they have that thing at Fenway Park. The law in Massachusetts says that the ad cannot be in a conspicuous place where it's constantly visible during a sporting event. What does that mean? Who knows? Does that mean they have to take the BetMGM ad and move it to foul territory or to the other side of the left field wall? There's a billion potential issues here with just that proposition. The age issue, the marketing issue, and the land-based casinos being the top three that I can think of right off the top of my head. So I think, where on the one hand you could say, yeah, that would make sense. On the other hand, you could say, where's 50 million reasons why it's not going to happen?
Oh, God. All right. I have Tuesday. Let's go to Tuesday here. It's Tuesday. It's 10 o'clock. I think Ray Bork is going to place the first bet.
He's in Springfield. Rob Ninkovich is supposed to be in Plainville. Now, I've gotten conflicting information as to whether or not it's going to be at 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock. I actually reached out to the Penn people and have yet to get a response on that. But yeah, Ray Bork is going to be in Springfield at 10. Rob Ninkovich is going to be in Plainville at 1 o'clock that I've been told, but
okay,
I haven't gotten confirmation on that. And then in Everett, where as of now, I'm going to be in Everett at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. You're going to have a phalanx of former greats. Sean Thornton, Cedric Maxwell, Johnny Damon, Ty Law, Eddie House, and a few others that I can't recall off the top of my head. You're going to have those folks placing the first bets all at 10 o'clock. And then you're going to have 32 civilians at kiosks in different parts of the casino placing bets thereafter. So they got quite a shindig there. And then at 6 o'clock, they got a sort of the second wave where Julian Edelman's going to be there. Now, he would have been there at 10 o'clock, but he's got to tape his NFL show that's on Showtime in New York on Tuesdays. That's when they tape it. And, of course, that'll be the week after the championship games. So Edelman is going to be in Everett at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. So I'm planning to be there right now. Those plans may or may not change depending on what my bosses want. But I'll be in Everett at 10 and or 6 on Tuesday. And depending on timing, I hope to get to Plainville. For sure, if they're doing something at 1 o'clock, I should be able to swing that. So I'm hoping to hit at least 2 out of the 3 on Tuesday. Kind of fulfill my 12-year-old dreams.
Same here. It wouldn't be fair to you. The 2 NFL games this weekend. I enjoy the AFC NFC Championship weekend usually far more than the 2 weeks in the Super Bowl. There's something about this weekend versus the Super Bowl where we sometimes get the blowouts. Currently, as I speak at the Circa, the Eagles -2.5, -15 cents with an under over of 46.5. Overnight, the Circa got a little money and moved Kansas City now to 1.5 with a 48. Any leans, any insights?
I tell you, I jumped on the Eagles and the under right away.
Okay.
Because I think we saw San Francisco struggle to score against Dallas, a team that Tom Brady threw for 355 yards against. And I also like the under in the Eagles-Giants game, even though they scored 34 points, because I thought it was going to be 31-7. It was 38-7. So, I think the Eagles are super talented. I'm not worried about Jalen Hurts. But I just think, your typical NFC Championship game is kind of a slog. You saw, and I really noticed this last week, you saw how Kyle Shanahan pulled back the reins on Brock Purdy, especially in the red zone. Take a look at those play calls. I think I remember him throwing once in the red zone on a 3rd and 10, which, was like they just blitzed him and buried him. So they're kind of pulling the reins back on him, kind of a lot of what they did with Brady in the, AFC playoffs. And I see that's the parallel I like. Even though Brady wasn't a rookie that year, he really was a rookie. And so his path and his first full season and Brock Purdy's path have followed very similar, because you got to remember Jimmy Garoppolo's waiting in the wings. You remember Brady got hurt, Drew Bledsoe, blah, blah, blah. So you got Jimmy G waiting in the wings, waiting to blow a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl. So we had a 3.9 passer rating in the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl. That's great performance. Great performance. They drafted him to replace Tom Brady 9 years ago. Can you freaking believe that one? So that's kind of what I like. Dallas did a great job of taking away that deep threat. I mean, George Kittle's a beast. Christian McCaffrey's a beast. But I just think the Eagles have too many options on offense. And the other thing we've seen, and of course we're well schooled at this, you've seen a terrific emergence of these tight ends of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. You saw it with Cincinnati. You saw it with in Philly with Dallas Goedert, and of course Kelsey and Kittle, and even Schultz. I mean, he murdered the Bucs. So you're seeing a lot of tight ends get open, or being manned up with linebackers in these terrible matchups. So in that game, I really see a low scoring slog. I jumped on the Eagles money line at minus 145, but I don't think the spread's a bad bet either. In the AFC, you got to remember the Bengals opened up at plus 1.5. Mm-hmm. And that to me was the bet of the century. I like that. I like the, it was basically a 110 or one, even money proposition, depending on the money line, if you wanted to give up the point. So I like the Bengals when it was that. I like the Bengals even money or minus 110, however you want to split it, plus a point, minus 110 even money on the money line, whatever that was. Basically, I like the Bengals to win. Notwithstanding they've beaten Kansas City 27-24 in the past two matchups, and Joe Burrow's 3-0 against Pat Mahomes. I think it's much more an issue of the Bengals were able to control the line of scrimmage against Buffalo. And they pressured Josh Allen. They took away his deep threats. And I just don't see Kansas City's defense being able to slow them. I don't see them controlling the line of scrimmage in any way, shape, or form. So you're going to see a lot of runs. You're going to see Hayden Hurst have a big game, and then you'll get a couple of bombs to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think that's their magic formula. In that game, I actually like the over because I could see a situation, especially if the Bengals have a lead, where you're going to see Pat Mahomes trying to work some crazy magic. And, he's good for a couple of touchdowns in 13 seconds or whatever it is. So that's the kind of game where you might see a lot of points late. And you'll see that number go up. But I just like Cincinnati. Who was it? Brady himself said you got to like the teams that are playing the best, and no team is playing as well as Cincinnati is right now. So that's kind of how I broke down those two games.
Yeah, the Cincinnati defense that allows 17 or less the last bazillion games, and no one talks about their defense.
Yeah, like you said, they just really dominated. They just dominated both lines of scrimmage. And I just don't think Kansas City I don't think Kansas City's defensive line is going to beat their offensive line. I don't think Kansas City's offensive line is going to stop them from and if you look at the playoffs, especially, I'm sorry, injury notwithstanding, Pat Mahomes is missing Tyreek Hill. Smith, Schuster, and Tony. Tony, I think it was just too late. I don't think he ever got into rhythm. And Juju Smith is no Tyreek Hill. He's missing that open, deep guy. The Tyreek Hill that got 220 yards against the Bucs 2 years ago when he was catching 70-yard bombs. They don't have that. So I just don't see them being able to beat Cincinnati. The great coaching, of course. Every team is great coaching here. You're not going to see dumb mistakes. You might see turnovers, but that'll be because of skill play, not just dumb play. You're not going to see any dumb plays this weekend. So it makes this weekend so good. You have the best quality football. You have really good teams playing each other with really good coaches. There's no Pete Carroll around. You don't have any dimwits in these games. You don't have all the bad coaching, all the mistake-prone teams are all weeded out by this point. So that's why these games are usually so good.
Closing, Kelly Stewart had a TikTok. No, it was on Instagram yesterday, and I found it fascinating. Potential 4 matchups. It doesn't matter how you put it together. Philly, Cincinnati, Philly, Kansas City, 49ers, Kansas City, 49ers, Cincinnati. Every one of those games is a 1 point either which way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, pick them with 46 total? Yeah, that sounds about right. 45.5, 46 total. Neutral site. Sure. Injury notwithstanding, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't see how you give any team more than 1.5 or 2 points in any of these matchups. And I think what we saw with that Cincinnati line, I think you're going to see basically that, because I don't think the books want to be burned. Like if they install, let's say it's Philly and Cincinnati, they might install the Bengals -2. And then a C-170 flies in with all the cash on Philly and they get caught in the middle. I don't think you're going to see that. I think you'll see a pick 'em or close to it because I think they want to play this one pretty straight. And it's really, really hard, given these matchups, injuries notwithstanding, to see how you can give more than any of these teams more than 1 point or 2 in a Super Bowl.
It's going to be something special. Bill, we can't thank you enough. If anyone watching and listening is not following, please go over to @bookies.com. Catch his work at the Boston Herald. I could talk for hours. We didn't even get into Wonderland and Kay's Broadway, Raynham and Swedish episode. The list is endless. Flanagan, Steve. I mean, I can go on and on and on. So the door is open. Don't be shy. Reach out whenever you get some hot information, what's going on with Mass, the stage, the platform's yours. You want to come on and talk sports, Red Sox, whatever it is. We're here for you, Billy.
I appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So to all the listeners, thank you so much. 1 o'clock, B2B at Beating the Bookie will join us from Miami. And then at 2:30, Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks and Wager Talk, the Philly special. We'll get some inside scoop on Jalen Hurts, what's going on with Philly and the Eagles and their matchup against the 49ers. Till then, have a great morning and see you soon.